was so depressed, and I went and got the Bible, and I turned to the book of Revelation. And if people would just get and read the Bible and read the book of Revelations, they would really turn around and straighten up. This is all we need to do, is just get the good book and read it and put it to everyday life.
Sisters, niggas, whiteys, Jews, crackers. Don't worry. If there's hell below, we're all gonna go.
Hello and welcome to number 8 of my video synopsis. Unfortunately, I can't make 15-minute separate installments due to difficulty in making these videos. Therefore, number 8 will be approximately 40 minutes long. Number 9 again will be approximately 40 minutes long. And that will be the end of this short story, From Ship to Shore. Please stick around. The ending has a very climatic finish to it, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and hopefully somebody will take an interest in it. Let me emphasize that this is just a short story of the overall book manuscript, Colors, Ancient African Connection to the Crips and the Bloods. This is just an excerpt short story. The two best high school football teams in Los Angeles, California are the Vermont Vikings and the Santa Ana Warriors. Both teams went undefeated within their respective division conferences for the past 3 years in a row. The Vikings and the Warriors totally dominated the high school athletic league Southern California division. But because they are of separate school districts, the Vikings and the Warriors have never played one another. But that don't stop football fans from wish thinking and debating which young powerhouse football team would win if and when they ever met on the football field. A debate waged on for decades. Sport gurus and other radio sportcasters have weighed in on the wish thinking and debating, but because of the strong Crip blood affiliation to these two schools, the overwhelming presence of these two extremely violent rival gangs operating without immunity within the student population at Vermont and Santa Ana, the likelihood of the mighty Vikings and the fearsome Warriors football teams playing one another was 0 to never. But as the old saying goes, never say never. The Unified Teachers Union of Los Angeles and the LA Unified School District had always called the shots when it came to certain minor internal matters within the boundaries of the school district jurisdiction, mixing and matching, in other words, high school football teams to align with this or that school district was the job of the LA Unified School District. But then there came a politically powerful congressman named David Shore. He came to sit on the mayor's throne, and he seized control of the LA Unified School District to the sweet tune of sanctioning the high school football game that so many fans of the game and sports professionals around the country wished for and debated for years in the past. Besides having Southern California's winningest football teams and the two finest athletic departments overall, Vermont and Santa Ana high schools can also take claim to having excellent teachers and a hefty share of Southern California's brightest students. All this teacher talent and student potential can be found at Vermont High in the heart of the Watts district of LA on the east side, and at Santa Ana High School, which is located on the west side of the 101 Harbor Freeway in what's known as Compton, LA. Just two of America's best schools confined to the worst two neighborhoods in the country. Watts and Compton are the wildest and poorest urban jungles in all of California. These neighborhoods are beds of sharp thorns, each one plagued with dozens of individual street gangs, which make for a legitimate gangster culture, which society deem as an outcast culture. But their very nature, gang culture, are infectious because of their alluring power to attract new recruits. Society's precious young fertile minds, which are drawn to the glamorous gangster lifestyle and the sense of belonging, outcast social groups that not only through these outcast social groups offer protection, but they fulfill most existing voids that most all young people experience, such as the empty feeling of helplessness in their little worlds, which are dominated by the big world of adults, overly domineering adults for the most part. At this point in time, during what's known as the Decade of Shame, several violent factions of the West Side Crips street gang are at war with several dangerous factions of the Blood street gang. A lot of the war and violence takes place on schoolyards, and the total number of Blood factions, or let's say independent sets, just in LA County alone is approximately 70 street gangs. But there are just as many community-based group organizations of social workers willing and able to soldier the anti-gang cause, even on the dangerous front line of the battlefield. And if you combine the unemployed anti-gang crusaders, there would probably be 3 times the number of community programs and social workers championing the anti-gang cause, which is in essence a civil liberation quest, not an armed task force bent on elimination, but rather education, since there is no such thing as a total elimination of street gangs. Urban jungle school teachers are especially important components to the anti-gang cause. They do what they do not for fortune and fame, but out of a natural compassion and unconditional love for their jobs, working with and educating society's poorest and underprivileged youth. And like their precious young students and the schools themselves, teachers are confined to the front line of these urban jungle war zones. Teachers are the real fearless vanguards, the true-to-life anti-gangsters whose weapons are education. America, the great eagle, is the undisputed king of the hill right now on the political, economic world stage. But this superpower status is by virtue of several things other than just military might and economic power. America's most vital of institutions is its private and public school system, where budding young future leaders are systematically groomed and grown into wise young adults. Society's up-and-coming future benefactors of the endeavor to further America's growth and blossoming prosperity are society's youth population, who must first be properly educated and prepared for their vital future roles. Yet, with schools overcrowded with eager potential, there aren't enough teachers performing the task of cultivating and stirring these eager young minds on the right path. The universal aim of teachers, and that of all garden variety schools in every culture on earth, is the careful cultivation and positive growth of children. Ever since ancient times, elder members of ancient societies assumed the role of teachers. They made raising society's youth a vital priority. Thus the old phrase, "It takes a village to raise one child." Ancient elders taught that their youth population all about tribal law. They taught them proper social behavior and the importance of mastering and maintaining tribal customs and sacred religious practices. In addition, our ancient forefathers also taught the ancient youth population of their day to respect Mother Nature and how to understand and deal with nature's complex ways. In modern day societies, Parents are required to plant their children by day in either a public or private school, the purpose being to educate and cultivate today's youth into responsible young adults and ultimately into productive law-abiding members of family, community, and society as a whole. But today's novel society, as it lay in the bed that it made, unfortunately is seeing its schools turn into breeding ground for that outcast gangster culture, a violent, misguided culture that infects other budding young flowers with anti-society diseases in the form of negative attitudes and behaviors. And because youngsters today exhibit these anti-society traits for one reason or another, they are clearly considered breaking some fundamental rules of society and even nature in general in some cases. Thus the war on the outcast gang culture by, most notably, the law enforcement arm of our society. The gangster culture at Vermont High School is openly advertised, brightly displayed, with red graffiti plastered on every wall of the school and practically every public building of the surrounding neighborhoods is marked with red rag enigma of the Blood Street Gang. The red rag bandana, red graffiti, and a red dress code that gang members proudly adhere to is the Blood's symbolic patriotic flag. Real hardcore Blood members, however, possess killer passions for their red rag and zero tolerance toward the Crips' patriotic blue flag. The Crips, who glorify the color blue, are the Blood's most hated enemy. Therefore, no one wearing blue clothing is safe anywhere within or even near Blood territory. To do so and be identified as a Crip member could easily be a death sentence back in the day. Like a red shadow, the 70 or so Blood gangs, the individual gangs, cast their total dominance over neighborhoods and schoolyards far and wide, all across L.A. County and beyond. In the Watts District alone, there lives a giant red shadow, a large gang of Bloods called the Bounty Hunters. They blanket every street and every schoolyard within the 2 square mile section of dirty ghetto streets, Wild West saloon-like liquor stores, and dangerous public housing projects they call Nicholson Gardens. But the only thing that has grown, that has managed to grow in Watts, LA, in and around Nicholson Gardens amounts to a lawless modern-day tombstone plastered with red graffiti. Twice as many Wild West shootouts occur on a weekly basis in Watts than the one famous Old West shootout at the OK Corral between the Earp brothers and the Clantons, as we remember. Unquestionably, Vermont High is a red rag school, right along with every other institution of learning in the Watts area. From graduate school back down to the tiny elementary schoolyards, it's common to hear kids on the elementary schoolyard greet a fresh new student fresh out of preschool with such sad, revealing mindsets as, "You wearing blue, I can't play with you." On the west side of LA's urban jungle, however, the Crips street gang held sway in the late 1970s and early 80s. Everywhere abound, you find almost every building and billboard spray painted and defaced with blue graffiti. The message to all is all too clear. The west side of town was the Crips' domain. Unlike the Bloods, who were born from the merging of several independent street gangs that bled into tight-knit gang alliances that they named the Bloods, the Crips, on the other hand, are born direct products of the militant arm of the Black Panther movement of the 60s, or rather the Black Power movement of the 60s. No more so, of course, than most individual black men and women living in America's society at that time in history. But the Crips were unique in the fact that they went from a large, tight-knit neighborhood gang of homeboys no older than 16 years old, into a militant social group, and they advocated community self-government and the right to bear arms. The original young founders of the Crips, actually, they idolized the Black Panthers as role models. The legacy of LA gangs today, in fact, might have turned out much different if not for the fact that the founding leaders of the Crips were so young. They were too young to join the Panther leadership, and so there was no love lost, and true to their natures as born leaders, Tookie Williams and Raymond Washington started their own young party of Black Power militants, and they called themselves the Crips. They adopted Panther revolutionary rhetoric and political ideology, as well as the Panther style of dress, the legendary black leather coat. Every Crip had to have one, at least one, and so for a while during the early period they called Crippin' anyone, not a Crip member that wound up in Crip territory wearing a nice black leather coat would quickly be relieved of it by threat of violence or even worse. It was called the Decade of Shame, the 10-year period between 1965 and 1975, when the FBI launched one of its most controversial anti-crime assaults on its own citizens. J. Edgar Hoover set into motion a covert operation to systematically eliminate radical leftist political groups, as well as any individuals that J. Edgar felt posed a threat to American society. The Black Panthers, for one, was number one on the FBI's most wanted list of radical groups with a socialist agenda. Publicly, J. Edgar claimed the Panthers were the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. The covert operation that he started was named COUNTERPRO. It's an acronym for Counterintelligence Program. This arm of America's elite law enforcement agencies came to specialize in illegal surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting homegrown domestic political organizations who were voicing opposition toward what they considered a capitalist system of haves and have-nots, a system of inequality designed to take bread from the mouths and the pockets of the poor working class people in order to fatten the bellies and enrich the bank accounts of the rich, aristocratic class people in society. COUNTERPRO gave the FBI the green light to stage illegal clandestine attacks on the Panthers. Panther leaders by the dozens were assassinated, jailed, forced into exile, and worse yet, victims of the chemical weapon crack cocaine that rendered so many urban jungle residents scarred for life, both mentally and physically useless to self and society. Also, the fallout from J. Edgar Hoover's systematic dismantling of the Black Panther Party, gangster style, had a far-reaching effect on LA's outcast gangster culture. Elvis Cleaver, an OG Panther leader whom J. Edgar ran out of town, explained the gang dilemma during the Decade of Shame this way, and I quote, "As it was," Elvis Cleaver said, "the U.S. government chopped off the head of the Black Liberation Movement and left the body there armed. That's why all these young bloods are out there now. They've got the rhetoric but are without the political direction, and they've got the guns," unquote. Indirectly, the young, inexperienced founding leaders of the OG Crips of the west side of LA wound up casualties of that period between 1965 and 1975, the Decade of Shame. One young leader, Raymond Washington, was cold-bloodedly killed in a drive-by shooting, and the other fearless vanguard leader was executed on San Quentin's death row. Without central leadership, the Crips delved headlong into the trap of crack cocaine and the highly lucrative dope game. As a group, as young as they were, the Crips and the Bloods had entrepreneurial ambitions beyond imagination, which made them vulnerable, though, to be used as pawns in a covert network operation of high-level drug smuggling. Unwittingly, the Crips and Bloods, as well as a lot of Mexican gangsters, all became perfect vehicles to spread the deadly chemical weapon in our neighborhoods, crack cocaine, throughout their own jungle-urban homeland. The highly staggering sums of money from selling this crack cocaine allowed the Crips to arm themselves with the latest high-tech weaponry. Each splendid off set of Crip gangs went their own separate ways, well armed and well supplied with the well disguised chemical weapon that they thought was a golden egg, crack cocaine. It was a chemical weapon that they knew nothing about. They went in the blind, greedily pursuing new territory in which to peddle their newly found trade, which hit the scene like a godsend. They made mind-boggling profits that gave them the illusion that they were gods, and thus they had the inalienable right to control all distribution of crack cocaine, which meant, of course, seizing territory by any means. The Crips launched an aggressive takeover campaign, seizing all areas of the city where crack cocaine was selling and bringing in big profits. Finally, the Blue Shadow reached deep, too deep, into the east side of town, where they were stopped dead in their tracks by an equally well-armed, well-organized coalition of blood street gangs. The leaders of several independent East Side gangs, seeing the Blue Shadow being cast their way, swore an alliance with each other and thus formed the Alliance, a powerful, united front, armed and dangerous, to ward off Crip aggression. Appropriately, the founding leaders of the East Side Gang Alliance named themselves the Bloods, for indeed they, the bounty hunters, the Pyrus, the Peace Stones, and the 8 Trade Gangsters, just to name a few, did bleed into one another to form a unified force to be recognized and feared. Leaders of the Blood Alliance apparently knew the importance of not leaving an enemy behind, and that the best defense is a strong offense, because the Bloods went on an aggressive takeover campaign of their own. They seized dope-selling territory, branding them with red graffiti. A can of red spray paint know no boundaries, and neither do blood graffiti artists who, without hesitation, invaded Crip territory and boldly spray painted over any and all blue graffiti. Thus, the deadly war between the Crips and the Bloods began and waged on with no end in sight. An all-out gang war with strong, subtle ironies that few on the outside knew about, and none of the warring gangsters had time nor reason to consider. For one thing, the Crip-Blood rivalry was a war for territorial control of the distribution and the sale of was actually a chemical weapon. Crack cocaine wound up destroying the lives of some of the gangsters' very own mothers, fathers, as well as fellow comrades in the gang. The other irony, however, has a much deeper, far-reaching significance that spanned the globe all the way back to ancient Africa. Unbeknown to most of us in society today, as we watch the Crips and Bloods navigate themselves into the history books, is the little-known fact that the Crips and Bloods share an ancient African history. Except for a few of today's triple OG ancestors of ex-plantation slaves, no ears beyond Africa have heard the tale of the inception of the red and blue phenomenon. Surviving ancestors of Louisiana plantation slaves tell the story of 2 African warriors that landed in America, chained together side by side aboard a slave ship that arrived in New Orleans around 1850. The arrival of these 2 captured enslaved African warriors is what gave birth indirectly to the Crips and the Bloods. It all came to light as a result of events surrounding this highly controversial, biggest high school football game ever put on. The newly elected Mayor David Shore overruled the UTLA and the LAUSD, and sanctioned the controversial first ever grudge match football game between a red rag school and a blue rag school. Not just any two red rag, blue rag schools, but the two most gang-infected, highly feared urban jungle high schools in all of Southern California, Vermont and Santa Ana high schools. The two major epic centers, the breeding grounds and gateways into Crip blood gang culture. The Crip blood rivalry and the ever-mounting hostility between these two gang high schools was suspiciously being ignored by right-wing so-called anti-gang activists. It seems as though certain government-backed watchdog law enforcement agencies were purposefully turning a blind eye to the mountain gang warfare between the Crips and the Bloods, as if giving these youngsters room enough to hang themselves. For a major urban riot or a juicy gang war would afford law enforcement the opportunity to test the latest high-tech weaponry in the government's arsenal. Ray Charles from his grave can see how explosively touchy the gang situation was back then. The mere mention of either school in an insulting manner from the lips of another student attending the opposite school could easily result in the lip server being killed or seriously beaten up. This is how thick the tension was in the air in and around Vermont High and Santa Ana. Yet it was during this seething period of the LA gang wars that Mayor Shore himself, a right-wing extremist and strong advocate for aggressive law enforcement, signed off on the highly controversial football game between the Red Rag Vermont Vikings and the Blue Rag Santa Ana Fearsome Warriors. The controversial Red Rag Blue Rag grudge match football game will be played at Shore Park, a newly built sprawling public amusement park and athletic complex featuring an outdoor athletic field for minor league baseball and soccer teams, along with a huge football and basketball indoor stadium to accommodate college bowl teams and high school football and basketball championship games. The impressive state-of-the-art public complex was named, of course, after Mayor David Shore for his outstanding 25-year political career as a leading congressman, big business mogul, and shrewd philanthropist who tactically put his money where his mouth and political positional matters will best be heard and acted on in his best interest. Liberal critics of the mayor's bold and reckless idea accused Mayor Shore of wanting to Christian the opening of the newly built stadium by putting on a Roman-style gladiatorial contest, using mere teenage boys as if they were real-life teams of gladiators chosen to entertain an arena full of bloodthirsty spectators. An early boycott of the game by the teachers union and the LA school district asking people not to come to the game was to no avail. People love football, and this particular event was billed as the first ever high school Super Bowl. What gave the upcoming big game its bloodthirsty crowd-drawing appeal is the Crip blood connection. The very potential of the game turning into a violent free-for-all gang war is what put this high school football game on the level of a modern-day Roman gladiator spectacle. In fact, it's on a level all its own. Critics charge that Mayor Shore and his right-wing pro-law enforcement constituents are simply capitalizing on the escalating gang warfare between the Crips and the Bloods, and in effect perpetrating the gang wars instead of trying to stop them. Other critics of Mayor Shore's gladiatorial game publicly predict a rerun of the 1960s deadly Watts uprising. That urban jungle revolt riot caused $40 million in property damage, more than 3,000 National Guardsmen, 930 LA police officers and 700 LA sheriff's deputies was called out, and no telling how many overtime and hazardous pay hours was doled out over the long and costly 6 days it took to put out the fires and quell the mass looting. The Watts riot was a wake-up call. The LA police force and the sheriff department, as well as law enforcement agencies across the country, all went to work upgrading and reinventing new assault weapons and anti-riot hardware in preparation of the next inevitable urban uprising. No greater potential for violence existed than Mayor Shore's utterly dangerous game plan to pack a 15,000 seating capacity stadium to standing room only with Crips and Blood gang members, their families, friends, and of course the many ordinary fans of both games, the college football, high school football, and on the other hand, gang banging. The sure recipe for the next urban jungle catastrophe. The teachers union and members of the Board of Education are the leading two liberal left-wing opposition groups who, although they put up a diligent battle, in the end they lost the war. The controversial and heated legal diplomatic struggle to stop Mayor Shore's gladiatorial game came to no avail. But still, one of the staunchest critics of the mayor, a real diehard anti-gang activist named Mary Webb, the president of the UTLA, fought on to the very end. Speaking to a local public TV network commentator, the fearless Mary Webb expressed her feelings on the matter this way, and I quote, "At the risk of maybe being accused of slander, which is the farthest thing from fact or truth, I personally feel, as many others do, that Mayor Shore is endangering public safety by staging this so-called high school Super Bowl. The mere idea of packing a 15,000-seat stadium with Crips and Bloods is beyond irresponsible. It's critical. It's criminal, in my opinion. These weren't gangs," she said, "and I'm talking about the Crips and the Bloods have sworn to kill one another on sight, and they, unfortunately, mean it. Just the past week, the bodies of 3 slain gang members were found dumped on either side of the Harbor Freeway. One body, identified as a Crip, was found on the west side, and the other, identified as a Blood, also shot in the head, lying in the gutter on the east side of our city. The third casualty was found in the trunk of a car pulled over by patrol officers in Compton. The driver of the car and 2 passengers were all gang members, Crip gang members. And guess what? The body in the trunk was a Blood. These murders are all acts of retaliation, tit for tat, cold-blooded executions. Kill one of ours and we'll kill one of yours. That's the mindset of these warring gangs, people. And we, as sworn protectors of the citizenry, should be doing all we can to curtail that mindset. Surely we shouldn't be giving these warring gangs a brand new state-of-the-art arena in which to battle it out in front of a live, prime-time TV audience for the whole world to see just how Los Angeles is dealing with our gang problem. Has Mayor Shore been living in a bubble? How can he not know the severity of these gang wars, the inevitable likelihood that this gang would turn out to be a bloody riot and a lot of innocent people are going to be seriously hurt and, God forbid, killed? Needless to say, in spite of the teachers' union's best effort, my people, the game unfortunately will take place the day after tomorrow. May God help us all. Unquote. Vermont High School has consistently been the country's fertile garden of athletic and academic talent. Athletic-wise, Vermont has turned out more Heisman Trophy nominees than any Southern California high school, although no Vermont Viking alumni has yet won the trophy. Still, Vermont's football program is every college scout's favorite pool to fish for the finest young talent. Amongst the Viking teams, that superb young ball player that college scouts scramble to win favor with is named Sonny Red Damu, the Vikings all-star quarterback 4 years in a row. From his very first year as a junior, Sonny's male peers, especially his many girlfriends, simply call him Sonny. But his name of fame among sports fans is Sonny Red, owing to an impressive shoulder-length head of red hair, twisted into pencil-sized dreadlocks. He stood 6'3", 220 pounds, with a throwing arm that more than matched his size. In fact, Sonny threw a football with such accuracy and force that receivers say catching him is like catching a cannonball. Sonny was light-skinned with hazel eyes, owing to the French Creole in his blood. His born name, in fact, was Sonny Le Damu Jr., but his father, Sonny Sr., better known and revered as the Red Rock, dropped the La, L-A, in Le Damu because, like 99% of American blacks, it is a name adopted from slave masters. A Frenchman in Sonny Sr.'s case, who owned the first slave plantation that his great-great-grandfather was forced to spend his life in cruel, unending servitude and degradation, is the name his father had to adopt. Sonny and his father rarely engaged in intimate father-son conversations due to Sonny Sr.'s on-the-fly occupation. He was frequently absent from their little ghetto apartment in a public housing project called Nicholson Gardens. Sonny's father is a radical, hardline civil rights activist and covert urban guerrilla resistance fighter, the UGRF. But when they did talk one-on-one, the conversation always centered on their family tree. Sonny Jr. had an avid curiosity about his forefathers, and Sonny Sr. knew plenty about their ancient African family tree. Like his son, Sonny Sr. was once a young, curious pup under his father's wing, and he too thirsted for knowledge of his true African origin. What Sonny Sr. learned from his father, he proudly tried to pass it down to start. What Sonny Sr. learned from his father, he proudly tried to pass as much information to Sonny Jr. as time would allow, since of course Sonny Sr. was always on the fly. Sonny Sr. informed Sonny Jr. who his ancient forefathers were, where they were from, and what they were all about, especially the religious practices that their forefathers believed in, fought for, and died for, and in some particular cases enslaved for. Life came with a price, Sonny Jr. was told during one of his rare, informative, short and sweet one-on-one conversations with his father. Sonny Red was taught that he owed a debt of gratitude to the OG forefathers that planted the first seeds that became their family tree. With every passing day, Sonny Red was taught that he was bound by a birth obligation to seek knowledge of his ancestral history surrounding his family tree, which will put him in spiritual unity with the living spirit of his ancestral forefathers. The past points the way to the future, Sonny Red was taught, and the knowledge of it, respect for it, and never forgetting it is the essence of ancestral worship, which in effect is a positive means to an enlightening end, the completion of the sacred circle of life. For most of Sonny Jr.'s adolescent years, his gun-toting black militant father was either in jail or on the run from the police, hiding out somewhere amongst the secret hidden world of the urban guerrilla vanguards. Finally, though, Sonny Sr.'s overactive hands-on participation in a series of urban guerrilla-style attacks on police stations landed Sonny Sr. in jail on a charge of suspicion of murder on a police officer. For the first few months following Sonny Sr.'s arrest, Sonny Jr. and his mother, Ebony, would visit Sonny Sr. every single visiting day while Sonny Sr. was confined in the county jail. But the day after Sonny's father was officially charged with first-degree murder, Sonny and his mother paid their last jailhouse visit. Sonny Sr. told his wife Ebony and his son Sonny Jr. to forget about him and never come back again. What consequences Sonny Sr. faced, he resolved to face them alone. And so, Sonny Jr. and his mother Ebony never returned to visit his father again. Sonny Sr., more commonly known as the Red Rock, because of his long red hair, which was twisted in the rope-sized dreadlocks. They called him Red, but it was his solid vanguard commitment to the armed resistance struggle and urban guerrilla warfare and the eradication of what he termed the existing capitalist system that they called him Rock.